Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. I'm doing these on Wednesday again, but I should be back to recording these on Thursdays next week, but I think there's a couple of questions, so let's jump in and see what we got. First up, Katazuma Gaming wanted to follow up with the discussion from last week about potentially getting a Switch and having different cables from different consoles. And they said if they decide to just save up and get something like a RetroTINK 4K CE, they don't even need to worry about something like the SVS Switch for now, because they could just take the consoles that they have HDMI adapters for and plug those into the HDMI port, and then keep SCART going to the SCART port, and then eventually upgrade to the SVS to mix signals. And I bring this up because the specific scenario they have is they have a GameCube, which I think was with a Carby or Carby-like device, a Wii with an HDMI adapter, and then a PS3 all through HDMI. And I think that's great. So first of all, PS3 through HDMI, you're just going to need a splitter or some kind of HDMI switch that is PS3 compatible, which those are very, very easy to find. So that's not a big deal at all. And for the GameCube with a Carby, that's exactly what you would want going into the RetroTINK 4K, because then you're having a true digital to digital scale. But I did just want to bring up the Wii. If you're using something like a quality Wii HDMI adapter, like the Electron Shepherd one, or if you got lucky and one of the AliExpress junks actually had a decent one that week, that's totally fine and absolutely the right move for your current scenario, just keeping one SCART switch and one HDMI switch. However, going to component video through the Wii or a digital to digital HDMI internal mod would be better, because you then would be utilizing the RetroTINK 4K's analog to digital conversion. And that's one of the many things that makes those things so expensive, is all the circuitry and code that goes into that conversion to make sure that you're getting the best quality out of it. So once again, for your current scenario of, hey, let me just leave everything in two switches so I wouldn't have to change anything until I save up more money, perfect. Zero reason to change that. But I just wanted to bring that up for other people who might be listening, because I do get the question a lot of, hey, what's the best way to connect my consoles into the RetroTINK 4K? Should I just get a bunch of Rad2Xs? And the answer is no, because a portable little plug and play device that goes into your console obviously is not going to have the same kind of components that a high-end scaler would have. I mean, I guess it could, but then each one of those Rad2Xs might be, almost as much as the TINK 4K, so it would be kind of useless. So no, whenever you're going into that HDMI port, you want, and when possible, a digital to digital solution, and everything else use the HDMI ports. So hopefully I was able to at least clear that up for anybody, but Katazuma, your plan's perfect. Stick with it. Next up, Tim the Gamer 23 wants to know if it's possible to swap the white case of the RetroTINK 4K CE onto the 4K Pro. They assume they'd have to swap the heatsink too, and they haven't been able to find any teardowns on the 4K CE yet to compare with the Pro. So it should be possible. It should be the same shape motherboard, and while yes, you would have to move the heatsink, I think the heatsink's connected to the board itself, so that should transfer as well. I haven't done it. And if you're going to buy both just to do this, maybe just message Mike first to double check, but it should be possible, because one of the points of the CE is to reuse as many things as possible as the original, so that you would have to stock less things to make it cheaper overall to make. So that should work. This also might be an interesting time to think about painting, if you know anybody that's good at that stuff, because if you're going to swap something out like that, maybe you want to customize it even more. Maybe you'd want to take the Pro shell apart and do anything to it, paint it a whole different color, add stripes to it, whatever you want to do. The only thing I would suggest is that front piece that slides, make sure that whatever paint that you use, maybe you mask off the slide areas so that when it's open, you might still see some of the black there, but that way it doesn't fill up with paint, so you could still slide it open, or maybe integrate that into whatever paint job you do so the black stripes are there on purpose. Just my thoughts, but yeah, I don't know. It should work, but this might be a fun opportunity to just do something unique and weird. And who knows, maybe Mike someday will even think about doing a run of clear shells just for anybody who wants something totally weird and unique. And that would also kind of solve a problem of, if you walk over to it right now, which is which just by the color of the case. So you wouldn't have to worry about mixing and matching and wondering which was which. If you had a clear case, you just know, okay, this is aftermarket. Let me look at the PCB to double check. Let me see how big the heatsink is or something. But I have no idea if that's even possible. So that whole clear case thing is just stupid speculation. But yeah, it should work. But just if you don't already own them, maybe message Mike to double check. Next up, Pro Nerdy heard that plugging USB devices into USB hubs can add some input lag to the connected devices. Do I know of any input lag testing that's been done comparing using controllers into docks versus directly into USB ports? And also, some controllers like the 8BitDo Ultimate have a built-in USB port in the controller dock where the 2.4 gigahertz dongle can be plugged into. Then the dock can be connected to a PC, for example. Isn't the dock a USB hub essentially? So, all great questions. I'm going to start my answer by saying this is all speculation. I might be getting every single thing wrong, but I don't remember if I've done this test before. And in fact, I probably have. I just don't remember at all. Maybe I did a whole live stream on it because please don't forget, I've lag tested hundreds of things, maybe even up to 1,000 since I started RetroRGB. So it's hard to remember all of this off the top of my head, but theoretically it could absolutely go both ways. So I'll talk about the easy scenario. Let's say you have a USB 2.0 controller plugged into a USB 2.0 hub into a USB 2.0 port. Everything is working correctly. It's not some $1 AliExpress hub. It's a decent made with name brand chips on the circuit board, and there's nothing broken. That should be identical. But now let's say you plug identical in latency. But now let's say you plug in a USB stick and you start copying a 100 gigabyte file over as you're doing this. Yeah, it almost certainly is going to add latency because even though the controller inputs and outputs aren't using nearly as much bandwidth as anything like copying a file, the USB bus would still have to stop and wait and transfer, have both of the transfers going on at the same time. So that would absolutely have at least potential to add latency. But also, if you mismatch hubs, if there's something broken in your hub, if you just have a whole bunch of stuff plugged into it, if you have a wonky chipset for that the USB hub is being connected to, or that's being used to build the USB hub, there's a lot that could go wrong. And when you're talking about something like a dock that comes with, the controller, that might not actually be a hub. That might just be one single connection to the PC that allow you to charge and then also connect that through. So it might essentially just be an extension cable. And if the dock even has a power cord with it, it could just be separating power to the AC adapter and then data to your PC, which that's also very common with USB hubs at all. So it could be that it's not a hub, or it could be that since there's only one or two things plugged into it and both are the controller, then it's not really going to be something that could affect latency. However, it is my opinion that if you're in a situation like this, just plug the controller directly into your PC. Having a USB extension cable to either a wired controller or just a wireless dongle is not going to add latency at all. And it would either work or not. So if you plug it in and you're getting constant dropouts, that's a bad extension cable. If it works, that's impossible to add latency. You'd have to have it like a mile long or something like that. So the power wouldn't work anyway. But yeah, so those are all excellent questions. And I do have some lag testing coming up soon. So I'll remember to try this and see. It's not going to be an in-depth, testing 50 different docks type of thing. But just out of curiosity, I'll test a self-powered one. I'll test one that's powered with AC. And I'll also start transferring a file at the same time or something just to see. And, I could see what happens with that. But my gut is saying it always has a potential. Actually, anytime you add any component to your chain at any spot, there's always the potential for latency. So avoid it when possible, and you could always at least try to measure. And that GamePadla lag tester, that might be the perfect thing for this, because when you're testing on a PC, you're also getting the PC's latency as well. So you're going to get much higher readings than going through like the Mr. Lag tester. But if you do something like you lag test your controller, 4 times in a row, and it's all within a millisecond of each other, and then you plug it into a hub and you test it 4 times in a row and it's different. Yeah, I mean, that's the difference is going to be what the latency added. So I'll try to remember that the next time I do this stuff. But if you're somebody who worries about latency, just plug it directly into your PC and try to match specs when possible. I've rarely seen issues, but I absolutely had one audio interface that was USB 2. And if you plug it into a USB 3 port, it pops and clicks. And what it could just be that I happen to have 2 USB 3.0 devices that used the same chipset it wasn't compatible with, and every other chipset on the planet was. But that's just a lesson I learned in that, try to match the USB protocols if latency is something that's bothering you or could bother you. but that's way less to worry about. So the short answer to your question, yeah, it's absolutely possible. So just plug it into your PC if you can, because why not, right? Next up, Dustin Madison wants to know if the FlippyDrive and Kunai GC would be compatible with each other. I do not know the answer to this at all, but I can't imagine they wouldn't be, because the FlippyDrive just plugs in place of the optical drive, and the Kunai GC is a mod chip. So there could be a scenario in which you have to change settings on each to make it work properly. It's possible that they're not compatible, but I can't see a reason why it wouldn't be, unless you have one overriding settings of the other that are trying to bump heads or something like that. But also, respectfully, I'm not really sure why you would want both. So maybe I could ask you a question. What would be the advantage of having both? Could there be potentially a feature added that wouldn't be able to be had with just one as opposed to having both? I'm not an expert on both of these. I've been following both projects since their release. I think they're both awesome ways of going about doing homebrew stuff on your GameCube, but I just don't know what you would get with having both. So let me know next week or in the comments or something. But I don't think there would be an issue. But could anybody else chime in too? I have no problem being wrong. If I'm being a total moron, let me know. I just couldn't imagine what would happen unless you set them both to do the same thing at the same time. Next up is 2 questions from Sal. First, they're finally getting their hands on their Holy Grail CRT soon, a Bang & Olufsen MX4000. Since the TV is Denmark, is there something specific they should be looking for to convert power, or is any old Amazon converter fine to use? So I would start by reading the manual. I don't know the specifics of that TV. I think I've seen videos on it and it looked pretty awesome. But if it has like a PC style plug in the back where you could add your own power cord, definitely check the manual and check the writing on the plastic. It's possible you have a universal power supply in there, but double and triple check. I mean, even if you know somebody that owns one, download the manual anyway, because what are you going to do? Waste a couple minutes of your time to make sure you don't blow out your Holy Grail CRT? So find that to make sure. If it's got a wired power cable, it almost like built into it that you can't remove, it almost positively is just European power. And the only suggestion I would offer for that is just don't buy garbage. Do some kind of research. Don't jump on AliExpress and buy a converter for $1. Just do a little bit of research, check out a couple of YouTubers, see what test methods they use. Because if somebody says, I plugged it in and it works, isn't that great? I'm an expert. Like, that's not the person you want to listen to. You want to listen to somebody who's done some actual testing, make sure there's no power ripple or anything weird going on. You don't have to go crazy, but just don't buy garbage for that, and you should be fine. But if anybody has any suggestions, by all means, chime in. The next question, they're having a hard time finding a high-quality 2 to 3 foot component cable. They'd just get the HD Retrovisions, but 6 feet is overkill for their needs, and they pride themselves on the cable management of their setup. They like to plan things out. Any recommendations? Yeah, so either buy expensive cables like Blue Jeans cable, or just buy cheap ones and test it yourself. Now, whatever, the right answer is going to be different for everybody listening. Right? If you got extra cash and you just don't want to mess with this stuff and your time is valuable to you, just buy an expensive 3 foot cable and, from somebody like Blue Jeans cable that's known to make good stuff, and go from there. If not, then my suggestion would be buy from Monoprice or Amazon. Make sure it says shielded in the listing, and then either test it against something like HD Retrovision cables to see if you get interference. So that Super Mario World first level test that I always show, the one I think to the left of Yoshi's house, where it's just the beginning of the level. If you just pause it and you do a couple of screenshots with like the HD Retrovision cables connected, remove those cables, plug in the 3 foot, do a couple more screenshots. If you see noticeable interference, especially like diagonal lines or anything weird, then it's not properly shielded for your setup. If that's not an easy thing to do, you could always buy 2 cheap ones and then cut one of them open and see for yourself, which if you're somebody who constantly uses bits of cable to patch stuff in your setup, that's probably a great idea. I think myself and many of my fellow nerds have a bag of pieces of cable that we often use. And even if it's unshielded, sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you just want to patch something together real quick. So that's cool. But I also know a ton of other people that not only would they never use patched up cables, they just hate the idea of cutting something up and wasting it, which I completely agree with as well. I don't waste those. I use them as patches for my, my soldering experiments. So choose whichever is best for you out of those three answers. But sometimes it's best to just go and buy the good stuff and never worry about it again, especially if you're the type of person who like runs everything super neat and zip ties your wires together and never wants to touch it again. That's kind of the time to just buy the expensive stuff, knowing that you don't have to worry about it. Next up, Rent Optional was doing a Dreamcast PSU recap and attempted to do the battery swap mod. They got the battery holder off fine, but just couldn't clear the holes of solder. They asked ChatGPT and Gemini, which both said the Dreamcast would run fine without the holder in it. It just wouldn't save the time. When they put it back together, the Dreamcast would boot to the splash screen, but the fan wouldn't kick on and it would crash a second later. They assumed they failed in the recap, but upon testing the pins, it was getting the correct voltages, so they began to doubt whether ChatGPT was correct. Nowhere, anywhere on any forum could they find a record of anyone saying a Dreamcast would run fine without a battery holder. They reattempted to clear the holder holes and eventually got the new battery holder in, and didn't even put a battery in it, but the Dreamcast booted just fine and the fan kicked on. Is the PCB using the positive side of the battery holder as a jumper to kick the fan on? It goes into two through holes, so that is possible. Weird design for sure. Apparently, the Dreamcast will shut down if it doesn't detect a fan. That is kind of common knowledge, that part at least. Has anyone anywhere actually attempted to run a Dreamcast without the battery holder in? Did they stumble upon some weird Dreamcast design quirk? Also, don't ever rely on ChatGPT to help with modding projects. Yeah, I think any of us could have probably warned you about that, but it was fun that you did because we got to have this conversation. But that's a great question. So it is very, very possible that the traces of power were just run one to the next, and they didn't put multiple power traces in order to not run multiple things across a board. So it is very possible that having to put that through hole connector would actually bridge that. It could also be possible that the VIA itself has the proper solder on there and has the proper connections, but in desoldering that got dislodged a tiny bit. And then when you put it back in, that's what reconnected the circuit. So all of that is theoretically possible. I've never tried to run a Dreamcast without the battery holder in. But has anybody? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? That was a fun story either way, Rent. So thanks for showing or for sharing with that. But can anybody confirm either way what the truth is, just so we could know for our own nerd knowledge? Because that's just one of those things that I'd like to know the answer to, but you already got it solved, and I guess it doesn't really matter. But I'm curious. I want to know. So is that a thing? Is that a thing on all Dreamcast revisions? Is there just some that have the issue? And also, for at least the next couple of years, you should probably rely on the community directly for those questions and leave ChatGPT and Gemini and stuff like that to the more general stuff that, that's not a niche hobby's worth of knowledge. But yeah, that was a fun one. So anybody in the chat have any thoughts on this? Next up, Space Farmer wants to know how far should they keep non-shielded speakers from CRTs? They've had a PC CRT near a speaker for a few months now, far enough away that they don't see any discoloration and they haven't noticed any issues. But then they saw one of my videos where I said that even if there's no discoloration, the CRT could still get damaged over time. So I'll leave a link to that video for anybody else who hadn't seen it, who's curious, but I still stand by that statement. And I also still stand by my completely non-scientific, no research behind it answer of twice the distance from when you stop seeing discoloration on the screen. I have said that. I said that in that video. I've been saying it consistently for years, and no one has ever come back and given me, actually, no one's ever pushed back at all, not even like in a weird trolley way. So I'm going to assume that all of the experts that I talk to on a regular basis agree with me on that one. I did actually check with quite a few people over the years on that, but I'm always open to new knowledge. So if anybody has any info on that, but to elaborate a little bit more. So let's say you do what I did in that video and you put up a color bar screen and you set up a camera in manual mode, any camera, as long as it's in manual mode, and you walk that speaker close to the TV until you start seeing interference, and then slowly pull it back till you stop seeing interference. And very often that's like 2 feet away. It's not that far, 1.5 feet depending. So then move it 4 feet away and you should be, within reason. If it's 3.5, whatever, and then double and triple check. So let's say it's 3.5 feet away. keep that manual camera going and twist the CRT or the speaker, left and right, just kind of twirl it around. Obviously don't have the cables plugged in, and then play that footage back, play it back in full screen mode on your PC's monitor and stuff, and see if you see any discoloration at all. And also, especially when it's spinning, do you see it? Now, of course, if you see it when it's spinning, but you only see discoloration when the front of the speaker is pointed directly at it, you could still be safe. But those are kind of the tips that I normally give for that, because the one thing that I will tell you for a fact, because I still have the footage, is when I was putting the subwoofer over in the corner over there, I had a CRT in the bottom and I thought it was fine. But I went back and rechecked with the manual camera idea, and I had it on both. I did it twice, once with an all white screen and once with the color bars. And I actually noticed that, as I lifted the subwoofer up and put it in its spot, the screen got discolored and went back to all white. But when I compared the footage of, when it started out before I walked over to that side of the room till after, I did 2 screenshots, beginning and the end. And it was a little bit darker in the corner, barely noticeable, but it was. And I, of course, retested just to make sure it wasn't a camera fluke. So even though I thought that it was just far enough away, it actually wasn't. And that's the type of thing where if I had left that subwoofer there and I'd left that CRT there, eventually that could have caused damage because you're slowly pulling up against the magnetic field of the CRT. Whereas, if you had a scenario, and once again, speculation, but this is speculation with a lot of knowledge behind it. I think if you were in that scenario of you stop seeing interference 1.5 feet away, so now it's 3.5 or 3 feet away or something like that. You spin it around, even if there is some, imperceptible by your eyes difference in the magnetic field, I don't think that's going to be enough to do damage to it. Now, if you're talking about, I got an awesome PC CRT at a good deal, I would wholeheartedly just go ahead. But if this CRT that you're talking about is like the FW900, or if you just paid for a super calibrated BVM, I would say just buy shielded and don't even worry about this. The Yamaha speakers that I have here are fully shielded. I use them as both my PC speakers and also for the surround sound. And the Kanto Auras, there's a whole bunch of good shielded speakers you could still get right now, depending on what your needs are. So all of the things I said, I still stand by, but I will just add one final time. If you're talking about an expensive, rare CRT, just don't take the chance at all. Why bother, right? So just my opinions on that, but hopefully I could point you in the right direction with that info. A couple of questions from Mad Mardigan. First, hearing the intro song instantly hits me in the happy feels. Any chance I could release an MP3 of it for supporters? Thank you so much. I wrote all those songs with a fellow bandmate for us, and I really couldn't care if everybody on the planet hated every song, but I love when people actually like them. It makes me feel nice to hear it. Thank you so much. I do really appreciate that. Those songs were for us. And I just, I knew I wasn't going to be a rock star. I just wanted to write songs that I love to play and to listen to. So it's cool when other people like them as well. And I'll leave a link to the original song as well as the chiptunes version that I just paid somebody on Fiverr to make me a couple years afterwards. But yeah, I really enjoy that. And I wish someday I could just finish the songs that we have and record them into a real album. All I have is terrible stitched together demos of album 2. And I don't know, that would be a ton of work. And I don't know, I hope, but it was a decade ago. I don't even know if I could play that well anymore. Probably not, to be honest with you. But next, any plans to get the Retro Roundtable back together anytime soon? No, but I would totally be open to it as long as all of us were there. I really enjoyed doing those, and they were a lot of fun. And, I also just love getting together with friends and busting each other's chops, and this might sound weird, but when my friends make fun of me, it's some of the happiest moments of my life. Right? It's if you don't get what I mean, I totally understand. I'm probably just weird, but those were great. I laughed really, really hard at some of those. And there was a couple of times where I was really pissed in the moment, and I woke up the next day and I was like, why was I mad? That was really funny. And it was almost even funnier that I had got mad at I don't know. I enjoyed those a lot, but everybody would really have to be there, and we'd have to just deal with whatever flack we got from all of the continuous silliness and harassing each other that we do during those. Next up, what are some more modern games that I've played? Well, if I haven't played one on stream, then I probably haven't played it. Almost all of my gaming has just been on stream the past couple of years because life's been absolutely nuts. I did buy the last Zelda game for Switch, the retro styled one, which is still sealed. And when I bought RZ, I thought like during its release date, I had said, okay, it's going to come out on this day. So I'm going to try to clear up some time in the next 2 weeks so I could play it. And then my limited edition copy showed up like 8 months later at a time where I had zero free time. So I still haven't gotten a chance to play RZ. It's really frustrating that Limited Run Games does that. Maybe they could work out a way to give us a digital copy so that you could get your, like I would love to have gotten a digital version on the Switch. And that way I really wouldn't care if the collector's edition took a year to arrive because I'm still able to play the game. So that was annoying. And last, have I checked into eBay Live? Whatnot was fun, but gross too. Super gross. Really gross. I don't want to get into the whole story, but I will say this. What wasn't gross were the people like you who came and hung out and had some fun during them. And that was by far the best part, were the awesome people I got to hang out with. But I believe they were the same awesome people that hang out with us on YouTube and other places. So I don't think any of those awesome crew that would kind of hang out were part of Whatnot. I think they were just our group that went over there to see what it was like. But I didn't like anything else about it at all. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to turn this into negative. Now, the last time I even looked into eBay Live, they had just announced it to compete with Whatnot because Whatnot had just gotten a huge grant towards, an investment towards the company. So I think eBay saw that and tried to clone it. And that was the last I'd even heard of it. So does anybody here use it? What do you think? Is there any reason to try that out? I would almost rather just figure out some kind of way to do it in a YouTube stream and have some kind of plugin to do it. But I'm always open to new things. And I do have, I'm looking around here. I probably have like 10, 15 weird small things that nothing special, but things that I'm sure people would be interested in. Fun, weird stuff too, which, I think in those sales stuff, a lot of the weird stuff I sold that wasn't even expensive were some of the most fun because people were asking questions. I've never seen one of those. What does it do? And yeah, that was really enjoyable. So I don't know. What does everybody think? Should I look into eBay Live or should I just keep streaming like normal? Well, that's it for this week. As always, any questions you have, please ask wherever it is that you support in the latest Q&A post, because the way these services work, I can't really figure out what's a new question on an old post. Plus, as you saw today, I like just scrolling through in real time and answering them laid back as if we were all hanging out somewhere. In any place that you support, ask the question. Today, it just so happened to be only on Patreon because that's where most people are supporting, but none of that stuff matters. Wherever you support, I check them every week before and at the very end too, just in case new questions come in. So any questions you have, fire away. And as always, thank you so much to anybody who supports in any way, because it really is you who's keeping all this alive. So thanks again, and I'll see you next week.